All right, here we are again. Thanks for joining once more. We're building Tempest today, the custom micro framework that we're working on here on the channel. And yeah, we're going to continue. If you want to check out the previous things we did, there is a playlist on the channel page where you can take a look at everything that we've built and kind of get an idea of the design principles behind this framework. But today I wanted to yeah, take a look at request validation. And I'm still a little bit in doubt on how how I will tackle this. So maybe you can pitch in chat and we can yeah, we can have a talk about it and hopefully implement some things today. Let's take a look at this controller here. If you were present at previous streams, you remember this. And this is how I imagine Tempest to work, right? We have CRUD actions here, and you inject a request class. And that request is automatically resolved behind the scenes. And with that request, which is validated, you can actually map everything, all that data to a model to update it. That's the idea. I know there are a lot of like side notes to make here, but just want to repeat it. I do this every stream. This is a micro framework. Its first goal is just to learn things because that's fun. And its second goal, if it's being used in projects, it will be for very small prototype stuffed things. So just keep in mind that we don't have to cover all bases here. That's basically what I want to say. So yeah, this was my idea. We have an object request that's validated, and we map that data into a model. Okay, so how are we going to make sure the data from the request is validated, right? So this was my first idea. You might recognize this from our models. It doesn't differ all that much. If we take the book model here, it has some fields. Oh, I should remove this. It has some fields and yeah, with relations, has one and has many relations. And the request is kind of similar because that's yeah, that's very it happens quite a lot in CRUD applications where you're simply mapping data from the request to models, and very often one-to-one. So yeah, this was my first idea. We're going to use type properties with attributes to add like extra validation information. And whenever we build the request, it's going to be created from raw data, and we're going to validate whether all the rules apply. If they don't apply, we'll throw an exception. And otherwise, the request is returned and available in the controller, right? That was the first idea. Now, there's a downside with this approach, because you have to duplicate quite a lot of data. This is my request class here, and this is my book. So this is the request class for a book. And yeah, there is quite a lot of things that are similar. Oh, in this case, by the way, I forgot to add, this should be something like chapter data, of course, because Tempest needs to know what should be added in this array. So yeah, we have chapter data, which is kind of similar to chapters, right? I forgot. Well, I don't have a book relation here, but other than that, it's kind of the same. Author data, yeah, name and the inverse relation. We don't care about that in the request, but yeah, that's quite a lot of duplication basically. And if there's one thing that I would like this framework to be, is that it should be very convenient and should really get rid of all the boilerplate code. So I didn't really like this approach. Well, I like it. You know, there's the benefit of all properties of the request being available and being typed. But yeah, there are downsides, and I think we can do better. So another idea I had, I'm a Laravel developer, so you probably, well, if you're a Laravel developer, you know this too. By the way, my neighbors are making a lot of noise again. That's annoying. So something like this, right? Title, we're in the book request, so it should be probably a required rule, and new length rule. I actually created that one, min 10, max 120. You know, we could also have nested validation here, which is an upside. We could have something like author star. Once again, the keyboard. Required. So yeah, you know this. If you know Laravel, you know this is the way Laravel handles validation, and it has a couple of upsides. Mainly, you don't have to duplicate all this data, and especially the nested objects here. You just handle all that validation within one array. The downside is that you're not using PHP's type system. So like, for example, required, that's already implied here because this is not a nullable type. But here we have to really specifically mention it. And the biggest downside probably is autocompletion. These are strings and we don't have any way of telling what fields they map to. So we're basically a little bit in the dark here. So yeah, I also don't really like this approach. It has downsides, it has upsides, but the first one also has. So so I came up with one more solution. Yeah, let's go to our book model again. I was like, if this book model and this request are kind of the same, right? But the difference is validation rules. Why don't we just move the validation rules to here? And why don't we get rid of the request and just use the generic request that we have available already? It has like a get body method, which is an array. And basically that's it. Yeah, what do we think of that? Because our mapper, the thing that's handling all of this, it can work with arrays and convert those arrays to books and to model instances. For example, in a previous live stream yesterday, I showed how this mapper works with queries, but we can basically map anything. We might need to add a mapper for a request, but that's basically it. So yeah, I think that's an interesting idea, especially if we combine it with an interface. Let's actually add an interface here. Something like this is validated. Interface. And let's just keep it empty for now. And let's say our model always extends is validated, right? But now let's take a quick look at what's happening here. Let's assume that our mapper, that it understands that if the object it's getting, or sorry, that the object it's mapping to implements this interface is validated. And let's assume that if that is the case, it will perform validation checks. And if it encounters any validation errors, it will throw an exception, basically, which we can catch here or in the router. So if this is validated interface is just something on its own, we could still, if we want to, create request classes. We could say is validated, like this. And all of this would still work, basically. At least in my head, it would still work. So if you would need like additional flexibility and don't want to map things one-on-one to models, you could create a request class. It shouldn't even implement requests, basically, at this point. It can be a simple, this is data transfer object, basically, and it's validated. And in our controller, we can say map request to store book request. We can automate this, of course. And basically that's it. So with this approach, we have the convenience of being able to map data directly to models, which, remember, is probably the 90% use case in these kinds of projects that Tempest aims to build. And we still have the flexibility with rather limited overhead to build custom request classes that don't map one-to-one on models. So yeah, I think that's what I want to do, and we're going to lay the foundation for that today. Unless someone in the comments makes a really good argument why this is bad idea. So let me actually check here. John asks where he can find Tempest. It's not available yet. I mean, it's going to be open source, but it's not open source yet, basically. I'm still waiting a little bit until like the foundation is ready, basically, until you can make a very, very simple CRUD application with it. And I actually, let's take a look at my README. I have this to do here of things that I think are pretty important still. So it will take a little bit. And let's take a look at another question here. Wouldn't this last approach break single responsibility, having validation and ORM in the same class? I mean, yeah, definitely. But remember how I talked about interfaces and how I like to use interfaces instead of abstract classes. This is actually a pretty big example of why it's useful. One of these big programming principles is to have what's it called? Let me check Solid. Interface segregation, probably. Solid. Yeah, clients should not be forced to depend upon interfaces that they do not use. I'm not sure if this is like the core principle, but it is very related. But you've heard this before, right? Interfaces should be relatively small and specific, and people should be able to implement several interfaces whenever they see fit. Now, if our request class and our model class were abstract classes, we could only extend from one. But in this case, like, a model isn't necessarily a model. It's an object that happens to act like a model. I actually, now that I think of it, I just wrote a, hey, that's me. I just wrote a blog post about it. The difference between these two concepts. You can check it out if you want to. I'm not going to go through it over here, but yeah, I think there is quite a lot to say for this. Even though you would assume it breaks single responsibility, these classes in themselves don't really do anything except the ORM layer, because it's active record and we have to think about that. But this is just a simple class that happens to be able to implement is validated, and some external service knows how to deal with that and can do stuff with it. But this class itself isn't doing much. And in fact, it's just an object with some data in it. I wouldn't even call it a class. There are, in other programming languages, you have structs and other data types to model this kind of behavior. But anyway, it's a good question. It's a good question. Let's move on to Rob here. I really like the idea of using attributes as validators on your properties. I feel you have the best of both worlds. I feel that too. Yeah, static typing and easy to see validation. Yeah, I agree. Cool. So I also asked this question on Twitter, by the way. As usual, it wasn't really helpful. At least there isn't any consensus now. People seem to like the three approaches. So yeah, it's up to me, basically. Or if someone in chat comes with a great argument against it, but I don't think that will happen. So yeah, I think we're going to do this. The first step is to support validation, right? So let's take a look at our book. Let's say, oh yeah, we already extend the is validated interface here, and I added this this attribute. And so what should happen? let's go to our mapper test, object factory test actually. So we can write a test here. We can say something like test validation. And let's say we have, we want to make a book, right? So we say map some data to book. And in this case, we're going to, title should be a minimum of 10 characters. Let's just give it 1, right? And we actually expect a exception to be thrown at this point, right? Because our book implements is validated and it has a validation rule for this property. Okay, so let's implement that. We have our array to object mapper, and this is like the root mapper, because every mapper will basically convert to an array and then convert to an object. So everything passes through here. So for now, I want to implement this validation logic in this place, but we can still move it around. I mean, it's all work in progress, right? This is already quite a big class. I won't deny that. So yeah, let's go through the high level overview of what this mapper does. It gets an object which it will map data into, and it will loop over that object's properties, the public properties, and for every property it will try to resolve the data that's given in this data array. So if we take a look at this, it's going to loop over all properties of book, and it will check whether there's data available. Okay, some things can be uninitialized, and that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I have checks for that, basically. So what happens here next is just resolving the right value based on doc blocks and casting stuff. And then at the end, we have an object. Let's dump that out. And let's run this test. And I would expect, yeah, there's our object with title here. So at this point, we have a working, we have an object that was constructed in a valid way, but it isn't validated yet. So let's just call this validate object, right? Let's add that method. It will return void, because what it's going to do is loop over the object's properties, check for attributes, validation attributes, rule attributes actually, and yeah, it will generate validation results based on that. So that means we'll have to, by the way, I really hope you don't hear all that noise. Let me know something in chat. Oh, and let me check chat actually. Why are your test classes not final? I don't know, because they were generated and I haven't changed my my code templates for tests. But actually, let's quickly code templates. PHP unit test. Let's go over here. Final. Here we go. Fixed. Thanks for letting me know. So, oh, and by the way, thanks for letting me know you don't hear any noise. It's been quite the month actually. We moved because we're doing renovation works in our home, and I'm living with my parents-in-law, and it's still going to be another month. So I'm in this makeshift office here. I'm very grateful that we were able to live here, but their neighbors are making quite a lot of noise. But back to our validation. Actually, I think I made. Where did I put these attributes? I put them in the wrong place actually. Let's move this here. This was just me playing around. Let's say we have two rules, right? And we'll also have to provide an interface for it. Rule interface, and this interface will define whether a value is valid or not. So mixed value basically, and it should return a boolean, right? So let's implement rule like this, and every rule will basically decide whether the given value is valid for that rule or not, right? I'm just going to make 2 now because we don't really need to work out the details. I can do that off stream. Public, private is fine, and these should be nullable, because with named arguments you could say like length is max 200 and min doesn't matter, right? So count, I imagine this to be like a count for arrays, like a minimum item amount of items in it and a maximum amount of items as well, something like this. Okay, we should write tests, unit tests for these. Test length. So rule is new rule. We can just do it like this, and new rule. Go away. Stop it. New length, of course, and we'll pass a minimum of 10. And so we want to assert true that rule is valid for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? It's also valid for 11 and more, and false for this, basically, right? And we'll test max after this. So yeah, return value. So is valid if let's just use string length for now. So length is string length value. Then we'll return match true. I think that would be length is greater than min. I'm not going to use a match for now. So if min is set, then we'll check is valid is false. If min is set, then or no is valid is true probably. So if min is set, we'll validate that length should be greater or equal than min, right? Actually, I think I know a shortcut. What if we do it like this? Min is this, min or length, and max is this, max or length, and then we can simply return length is greater or equal to min, and length is and max. I think that works. It's just Boolean logic, right? Let's run our test. Yeah, it works. Let's do the same with max and with min-max combination. So max, I'm going to say 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That should be valid. 1, 2, 3, 4 should be valid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this should be false. Yeah, that works. And min-max. Min 2, max 5. So this should be valid. This should be valid. 2 should be valid as well. 1 should be invalid. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I cannot count. Yeah. Okay, it works. Let's take a look at chat. Crowley says he has never, or they have never written tests. I'm sorry. It's actually very, very useful in these kinds of projects. Well, it's always useful, but especially here, I can just I've a test for basically everything. They aren't all unit tests, but I'm pretty confident. I should actually scan for that, but I'm pretty confident that most things are covered. So I can just refactor things, which is really useful because I really want to refactor quite a lot of things still, and I'm sure that everything still works after my tests are all still green. So Drag asks, does Final add something special? Yes, it does quite a lot, but not performance-wise, as far as I know. But I'm going to talk about that on another stream that's coming up somewhere coming weeks. Adam asks, it could be, this could work as well. I don't know. I think I like my solution. Oh, Adam agrees. Thank you, Adam. Okay, great. So we have a rule. Let's just make one rule. I mean, it's good enough for now. We have a rule and we need a validator. And what will this validator do? So it's going to get a class, validate, it is validated object. It's going to get an object. And we're going to have to scan its properties. And it's actually going to return void, but it's going to throw a validation exception if there are any errors. So let's say exception validation exception rename. No, that's completely wrong. Validation exception extends exception. Oh yeah, I find read only here. I shouldn't do that. Yeah, okay, like this. Let's just keep this like this. We're going to fine tune it probably off stream. So we have our validator. Let's loop over our object, right, and check whether all is fine. Let's also add a test for that. Class object to be validated. That's going to be our test object. It's going to have one property, public string name, which is going to have a length of min to max 3, right? Like this. Let's write a test for this as well. Test validator. This expect exception, and what do we call validation exception? Like so. And validator is new validator. For now, we're going to add this in the dependency container. Okay, and then basically we want to do validate new object to be validated with a name of 1, basically. And this one should implement is validated. Okay. And what's wrong here? Of course, this isn't a promoted property. Like so. Yes. Okay, let's run this test, and it's going to fail. And I have a wrong exception imported here. Tempest, this is the one. Okay, yeah, this is good. This is what we expect. So we're going to loop over all properties. So we'll have to create a reflection class. Classes new reflection class over objects. We're going to loop over its public properties. So get properties. Reflection property is public. And as property. Yeah. Let me check a second. Also checking the comments for a second. Do you know if the new release of PHP Storm will also have LSP support for plugins as other JetBrains? Yes, yes. PHP Storm 23.2 will have language server protocol support. So basically, you can make your own programming languages if you have a server for it and if you create a plugin for it. Yes, I'm using PHP Storm. And Rob asks, if we're going back to Tempest, do you worry about the performance implication of using reflection? No, I don't. As far as I understand, these are very performant these days, ever since PHP 7, I think. So don't worry about it. I didn't know that's what I was told by Marco Pivetta, who made Doctrine, who does a lot of reflection, and it's all fine. He told me so. Let's just assume it works. And otherwise, again, it's a micro framework. It's not going to handle 10,000 requests per minute. So okay. Good. We have our properties. And we wanted to check whether they have rule attributes, and we can apply multiple rules to the same property. So rules equals property get attributes, and they should implement rule class and reflection. A reflection attribute is instance of. So we want all attributes that implement rules. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to immediately array map them because I want instances, right? So attribute, basically attribute, yeah. And we're going to return attribute new instance. No, it should be a reflection attribute, of course. New instance. Okay, good. Yeah. So now we have our rules. If all is well, we do with our min and max. And now we want to loop over these rules and validate whether the value of this property is okay. So let's have a boolean for now. Is valid is true. And then we'll loop over all rules as rule. And we'll check whether rule is, yeah, and I have to type hint this rule like this, is valid. And we're going to pass the value here. Value is property get value of our object. Yes. Value. And we'll say is valid is like so. Okay, now I want to be able to validate everything before I throw an exception. I think that makes more sense. So actually, let's do it like this. Failing rules is an empty array. And let's get rid of this boolean. Is valid. If not is valid, then we'll add to failing rules property get name, right? We'll add the rule to it. And in this case, when we exited our loop, so everything is scanned and validated. If our failing rules don't equal the empty array, it means we have a problem somewhere. And let's then throw a new validation exception. Is that the right one? Yeah. And we should pass the rules in here, of course, but to do pass in and parse failing rules. Okay. Okay, let's test that, and it works. Okay, cool. So we'll have to fine tune this quite a bit more, of course. But we have a validator, we have a rule, one rule. Now let's add it to our array to object. Oh yeah, here we are. We have a validator. Let's create it now. just here, and I'm not going to worry about injecting it. I cannot write anymore. Validator, yeah, is new validator. We're not going to worry about injecting anything. Again, fine tuning, doesn't matter. Basically, this is it expected. Oh yeah, if not object instance of is validated, then we'll just return. Then we don't have to validate this object. Okay. Okay. Let's try it out. We have a mapper test and actually now object factory test. Yeah, let's write this test. So what should happen here is that we get an exception. We do. So this expect exception validation exception class. And again, I imported the wrong one. That's so annoying. And it works. Nice. Okay, so, but remember what I told you, that this is on the model level now, but we could also still make custom request classes, right? Let's try that out. Let's say book request. Implements is validated, and it will have, say, one property string title, length min 2, max 3. Actually, that reminds me, I should probably, no, I'll have to write lots of edge case tests, but I'm not going to get distracted by that now, because I think this is the most important thing here. So we have a create book request, right? And our mapper is able to handle yeah, basically this should just work without anything else, I think. So that's interesting because do we still want this to implement requests? We could base request, and then we could, ooh, yeah, hang on, we don't need this test. We already have an initializer. It's called request initializer, which will basically build these classes for us. And the only thing we need to do here, and I'm going to copy some code for now, array mapper. No, I shouldn't copy code. It's as easy as I don't know if I'm still making sense, but I'm just really excited about all of this because like everything is just falling together seamlessly. And I like that, but it's difficult to explain. What I'm doing here is still looping over my body and creating, manually setting properties, but I don't need that anymore because I have my mapper now. I wrote this code before I had my mapper, which was probably not the smartest idea, but I did. And that means that I can get rid of all of this and I can just say request equals map. We'll have to make a data array to class name. And what we'll have to do here is when we need these things. We need these properties, and we need we also need our body values, right? which is basically just it should be over here, which is basically server get body, and it will unpack that into the same array. So we can get rid of this, I think. And let's say, do I have a test for this? I do, but it's in the router test. Route binding, generate. I wrote a test for it somewhere. Request test. Yes. Let's run these tests. Read-only class. Yeah, okay. Okay, and this fails. That's okay. Missing value exception. Because it's still, yeah, that's fine. I can fix that. Request initializer. So sorry for for being a little bit. Yeah, the problem here is that our mapper doesn't use it doesn't use the constructor, which is a good thing. Oh, now I ripped out too much. I still need this. So this is our base request, and I did some logic in the constructor here, but that should move to the request initializer, which isn't a big deal. That's even a good thing. So path and query, and let's add them here. So basically, this is where we're building the request, and I just have to move some data around. Okay, let's run our tests. One passed. URI must not be accessed before initialization, which means the URI wasn't set here, which means I probably just missed some setup. I didn't. So I still have to debug that. So let's just dump server here. Yeah, it doesn't end up here because this is a standard request class, I think. Yeah. Because our controller this is a generic. Oh, yeah, of course. But this is easily solved. New generic request. Well, can I keep the constructor? I can. Just had to move. Well, I can keep the constructor. Yeah, I should probably make this a little bit cleaner. But for now, I'll keep it like this. And there is some code duplication here. But again, fine-tuning. Yeah. And that's just needed because I want like the query and the path to be present as public properties on the request. Let's run this test. It works. Great. So that means, so what happens now if we custom request with validation? So let's take a look at our book controller here. We have our create book request. Okay. So the only thing we're going to do, our body is, what was it? Title, and it should be, so this should fail basically. This payload should fail. And it should go to the URI of create book no, sorry, book controller, and I still have to, there is a way to get auto-completion here, by the way, but I still have to refactor that. Post books, basically. Post books. Right, that's all I need. And there's also still some duplication in my test cases here, but also fine-tuning. So request URI posts this body. And we should actually get an exception here. Of course. Store. The request initializer couldn't, because there's a validation exception, because it works as expected. Okay, this is, okay, I still have to catch this exception and do stuff with it. But this is, I really like this approach, because remember how I told you that there were 3 options at the very start? We had like these request classes, but they had a bit of duplication. There was the Laravel style, which I didn't really like because it didn't have auto-completion. And there was validation on models. And now we can have both. And we only had to write our code once because we're mapping data. We're mapping data from our request to our model. We're mapping data from the base request to a specific request, which is basically nothing more than a DTO at this point. It has some data, including some request data, which is fine. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. I really like how it all came together, basically. Let me take a look at chat. I'm very happy now. Let's take a look. Crawley. Oh, Crawley still mentions he loves PHP Storm. I understand. I do too. Rob mentions that he loves the refactoring step where you just rip out a ton of code, and that's what I was talking about with these tests, right? I'm pretty confident that what I'm doing here is just fine because everything is or should be tested. So that's pretty cool. Catherine, she asks whether when validation gets triggered, it's in the mapper. You might have missed this in the stream, but so in our array to object mapper, we prepare the object basically, and then we at the very end we validate it, and underneath it just uses a validator which will loop over all properties. So Steve is just in time to say goodbye, and he also loves the final classes. I do too. Yeah. Oh, what Mac do you use? I have a Mac Mini where I'm streaming from, and I have a MacBook Air that I use to manage the stream, basically. But again, like I said, I'm not in my my home office at the moment, so things are it's a bit of a strange setup. I would normally manage everything on my Mac Mini, but I only have one display here. Okay, and a couple more questions. What this framework is about? Can you please explain what was the initial thoughts? Yeah, I can do it once more, but I would actually advise you to, after this stream, go to the channel page, and there are a couple of other streams. Let me actually show you. YouTube, PHP annotated. You go to the live view over here. This is where we're at right now, and these are the other videos I did about this framework. Yeah, you can go watch them. I explained quite a lot more about everything that's going on, also like the reasoning why we're building this. So what do you think of NeoVim? Never use it, sorry. So I don't have an opinion on it. Catherine, I think, Catherine, you missed the start of this stream. So basically, we now have both ways of doing it in Tempest. And it all works by mapping data. you can map data directly to, book controller. You can take this approach, which just imports the request. That's the generic request implementation, and it maps its data to the book, to a book model. Actually, just remember, I don't have a request mapper yet. I should probably do that, or I could do this, but I don't want to do that. So again, off stream. And so this is the first approach, which is very convenient. You don't have to write validation rules in two places, because like on your model, your book, you have validation rules applied here. But the other approach, if you want like more fine-grained control, is by creating custom request classes, and they work exactly the same way. They are handled behind the scenes, and when you get here, by the way, you have a validated instance of the request, of this request class, basically. Yeah. Poor Catherine, silly work meetings. You missed the start of the stream. That's totally fine. You can rewind after we end it. So, but I'm happy to explain it once more for people who joined later. But yeah, I'm very happy with how all of this turned out. Pretty cool how everything just fell together, kind of like pieces of a puzzle just fitting. I have to do some cleaning up. That always happens after a stream, but I'm very happy with what we did. One last question by Adam. When is the next stream? I don't know. It depends on my schedule here at home, and it depends on my work schedule as well. So soon. Like I told in the previous stream, I'm basically dreaming of this code of Tempest at the moment. So yeah. Looking forward to the next stream. So that's about it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, and please share this video with your friends and colleagues. Tell them about it. It would be cool to have a little bit of momentum going. So I'll see you next time.